So let's get down to the serious business. What I wanted to say was that, and I say this as a non-exec director of the BBC, 50 years ago, a BBC employee nearly killed me. It was on a hockey pitch in Monspur Park. You see, my dad worked for the BBC. He was an engineer. He was probably the first black engineer at the BBC, and he played hockey, and the BBC used to have a hockey pitch down at Monspur Park, and in those days we didn't do health and safety. So as a young lad, I was allowed to stand behind the goal watching the men play, and I distinctly remember standing there as someone rushed straight towards me and hit the ball, and it hit me square on the head, and I was flat on the floor. They put nets up after that. It's health and safety gone mad, if you ask me. I don't know if my dad belonged to the BBAF. If he did, he would probably have just been the only member. Although he did work on a variety of popular programs at the time. One of the ones he used to tell my mum about was a program, I don't know if you've heard of it, he was an engineer on the black and white minstrel show. So, I don't know, maybe they were members of the BBAF as well. Anyway, he absorbed a lot of the values of the BBC, and he went on in his career to work around Africa. He was involved in setting up several TV broadcast studios in Uganda, in Nigeria, and he always tried to take the vision of what he had learned here and apply it in the broadcast studios that he was involved in setting up. And it was a huge inspiration for me to see someone take a vision and turn it into action. As this quote talks about, combining vision with action is really, really important. And I wanted to talk about my vision, and I'm going to focus on my school in Africa, but what I wanted to emphasize is action, how I go about moving from vision to action, because I hear a lot of people talk to me about the vision they've got to do things, and then it's the struggle of, but what do I do and how do I do it? So I just wanted to share with you some of my observations. As was mentioned, my vision was in creating a school, and the reason why I did it is because we live in an era of technology and science where I think that small changes can have a massive impact. It's the butterfly effect from chaos theory. The flap of a butterfly's wings can cause a tornado on the other side of the world or the other side of the continent. So my idea, my vision, was what if I could create a school for the most brilliant young women, scientists and technologists, anywhere I could find them in Africa, bring them together and unleash them on the continent and let them flap their wings and see what impact they had. That was my vision. Then the challenge was, right, how do I turn that into action? And there are four things that I talk about. And the first is pace. What I've learned in doing things is that moving from vision to action takes time. And in this day and age, people are in a hurry. They want things to happen very quickly. My experience has been that it takes time. In fact, I think in 20-year blocks. I start something and I think I do literally plan out what I think I might be doing or what might happen in 20 years' time. And that's how I plan and that's what I do. I'll give you an example. I created a school in Hammersmith Academy. It was the first digital academy in the UK. And I had the idea for doing that in 2005. And I started work on it, and we finally opened the school in 2011, 6 years later. And 6 years later after that, it's finally got about 1,000 students in it, and it's fully set up and so forth. So it's taken 12 years to create one school from a blank sheet of paper to up and running. The same thing with my academy in Africa. I sat down even before that 2005 academy to think about what I would do with the school in Africa and how I would create it. In fact, it goes a long way back. The idea of harnessing the power of the butterfly effect goes back nearly 25 years, in fact. And I probably shouldn't tell this story with my wife in the audience, but I'm committed now. So when we got married, I was given one job, and my job was to arrange the honeymoon. And I thought, okay. I thought, for our honeymoon, what we'll do is we will go to a mathematical research institute in New Mexico. So that's what we did. We went to the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico. The Santa Fe Institute is the home for the study of science and of complexity theory. And they really study the idea that small changes can ripple through and have a huge effect. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting. Often, when we're talking about changing the world or changing society, we think we have to make massive changes. We have to harness thousands of people, hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. And what this tells you is actually one person, one girl, one piece of technology can change an entire continent. And that really is where my idea for what I'm doing started 25 years ago. And I'm thinking about the next 25 years of where we take it to. So pace is important when you're trying to move from vision to action. Mandela, 27 years in prison. You know, it's allowing yourself to thinking those sorts of chunks of time is incredibly important. The second thing is power and understanding power. In my spare time, I don't have a lot, but when I do have spare time, what I do to relax is Tai Chi. I do slow, gentle movements. Actually, it's a martial art. You know, it's a deadly martial art. I remember doing this once, and I said to my teacher, "What am I doing? How is that a martial art?" And she said, "What you're doing is you're knocking your opponent's hand away and plucking their eye out." That's what you're doing. So I've been doing this for many years now. And I can tell you that if someone attacks me, providing they move slowly, they are finished. But what I learned through Tai Chi and what it's about is that it's not your power that you're using, it's your opponent's power. You have to understand your opponent's power, and you use your opponent's power to achieve your ends. So in moving from vision to action, what I would say is assume that you have no power. You have no power. You are going to have to harness power from organizations, people, whoever it is around you in order to achieve your goals. So the expertise you need to have is how do I harness that power and energy around me in order to achieve my vision, not how do I myself acquire the power that I need to achieve my vision. And with my school, I took that approach. How do I find other schools around Africa? We work with over 50 other schools across the continent. How do I find donors? How do I find industry partners, universities? How do I harness all of them to come and make my vision in a reality? That's the action that I need to take, not to say, how do I get power myself and exercise that power? And I need to apply that power over and over again. So persistence is my third thing, my third key. I am very persistent. My first proper job was at British Airways. And sometimes when I talk in schools, they say, "Why did you start at British Airways?" And I tell them the truth. I started at British Airways because it begins with the letter B. Because I had applied to every company in the UK that began with A, and they had all said no. And then I moved on to the Bs, and I eventually got to British Airways, and they said yes. And so I decided to accept. I sometimes hear young people coming out of university and they talk to me and they say, "Oh, it's so hard. I've applied to 20 jobs and I've got 20 rejections." And I say, "Oh, it's so hard, it's so hard." But inward, I'm thinking 20? 50, I'm loosening up, I once applied to the same company for the same job 5 times in a row. The first time I applied, they rejected me. Now, to me, that establishes that the lines of communication are open. So I applied again. They said no. I applied again. They said no. The 4th time I applied, the head of human resources wrote me a letter. And she said, "Dear Mr. Illube, I'd like to speak to you. Please call." I said, "You see these people?" Somehow I suddenly became very African. You see these people? So I called her up, and she said, "Tom," she said, "we've had a lot of applications from you, and but you don't have the right background. You don't have the right experience. We will never offer you a job." So I waited 2 weeks and applied again. That's what I do. So with the school, I just continuously go, raising money to get funds for the school. I pitch to people over and over again. I pitch to the same people over again. We had problems with land. Other people would give up. I go again. Everyone else will give up. I will keep going. I just won't stop if I want to turn this vision to action. And you will do the same thing. When you really want to turn your vision into action, you just won't stop. You will keep going and going because persistence counts for a lot. The last thing is the pitch. Vision, getting the clarity of your vision so that you can pitch it is really, really important. People can't help you if they don't really understand what it is you're about. So getting it really tight and clear is important. And you need your 30-second pitch, you need your 5-minute pitch, and you need your 1-hour pitch. You need all of those. You never know when you're going to be in a lift with Bill Gates or when you're going to be in the corridor with Tony Hall or whoever, and you've literally got 30 seconds and they say, "What are you doing?" You don't have time to say, "Well, if I can just walk you through this presentation," that's not going to happen. You need to have your 30-second pitch. I'm an entrepreneur. I raise money. I go out. I think of a business idea. I pitch to venture capital guys. I raise money. I build the business. And I remember once I went to see a venture capital guy, and he said, "Have you got your elevator pitch?" And I said, "Yes, I've got my elevator pitch." And he said, "Come with me." And we went. I thought we were going to a meeting room. It turned out he took me to an elevator. And we went in, and he pressed 5 and said, "Go on then." And I said, and then the doors opened, and he said, "Goodbye." And that was it. I had the opportunity. I didn't have my 30-second pitch. You really need to have that, the whole thing. And you structure that as a fairy tale. There's a dragon, there's a knight in shining armor, there's a happily ever after. And you get your story down to what's the dragon, what's the knight in shining armor, what's the happily ever after, and you learn how to pitch that in just 30 seconds. That is so important because at the end of the day, we're storytellers. We're in the home of storytelling. That's what we need to do. We need to be able to take our vision and turn it into a story and tell that story. My favorite proverb, my favorite African proverb is, "Until lions have their own storytellers, tales of the hunt will always favor the hunter." We need to be able to tell our own stories, and to turn vision into action, we need to be able to tell our story, we need to be able to live our story, and if we do that, we might just change the world. Thank you.